Hello, and welcome to RNR's first ever Real Stories in Restoration episode. This series of our Ask the Expert podcast shares the stories of the people in restoration and remediation from all corners and all levels of the industry. I am your host, Valerie King, RNR's editor in chief. I'm joined today by Sean Scott, who may be a familiar name, as Sean has been a valued contributor to RNR since at least 2018. Sean has over 43 years of experience in the restoration and construction industry and has published numerous books, papers, and articles, including Secrets of the Insurance Game and the Red Guide to Recovery Resource Handbook for Disaster Survivors. I am so thrilled to have Sean on today to share his journey in restoration and, toward the end of this interview, share some really exciting news about what's ahead for him and R&R. That is enough for me. Thank you so much for joining me, Sean.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. All right, so I understand that restoration dates back to 1937 in your family, and this is
Yes.
a second generation situation here. So, can you share the story with us of where restoration begins in your family and how on earth you found your way into it?
Sure. Well, so my dad was a fire restoration contractor in Chicago. And in the 30s, he was basically working with the fire chief to, you know, rebuild buildings and homes that were damaged by fire. But that was far before a time when we had all the technology and ozone machines and cleaning supplies that we have today. It was, get in there, get dirty. There was no respirators, asbestos was everywhere. So he was really, in the getting dirty and hands-on with everything. And most of those homes were the Victorian, older type homes, so it was quite a higher level of craftsmanship in his day. And then World War II hit, and he became a CB in the Pacific, and then came back after that and started a building business to help house all the veterans coming back from World War II. And so then I was born in 1964, and shortly thereafter, he kind of just as a kid started getting me acquainted with every facet of construction and the trades and restoration. And then when I became about 23 years old, I embarked on my own restoration company, and that's kind of where I got started. So, and it's been, guns blazing ever since.
That's such a great story and so cool
Yeah.
to know your dad's journey in restoration and how things a little bit about how things have evolved since.
Yeah.
So, now that we know the path that led you to the industry, can you talk more about the different roles you've played in it? From estimating services, I understand, to contracting, to authoring, all of it?
Yeah, so I essentially, you start, from sweeping floors, digging ditches, setting forms, pouring concrete. I mean, you learned, at least I did, every facet of how to build a building, commercial or residential, from the ground up, surveying land, all of it. And then from that, it just grows into learning how to run a business, how to deal with employees, compensation packages, sales. I mean, there really isn't a school that you can go to learn this business. I mean, you can learn certain things that are important in school, but as far as creating and having a restoration company that's thriving and profitable, you have to surround yourself with people who are more knowledgeable than you are, who've made those mistakes so you don't have to. And I've spent millions of dollars in mistakes. And that's what's given me the ability to write books about my journey of, like, the secrets of the insurance game is somewhat of an expose of our industry, as well as a tool to help restorers see some of these pitfalls I've encountered and others, why certain companies fail and why others flourish. And so there's a lot of lessons learned over 43 years that can really put up and coming restorers on a level playing field and have a chance to really be successful.
Thanks, Sean. So, what would you say are your main areas of focus today? What keeps you busy now?
Well, I do a lot of consulting, expert witness work, estimating, for insurance companies, homeowners, property owners, attorneys. I do a lot of appraisals, whereas that's a dispute resolution mechanism. So if you are a homeowner and you don't agree with what the insurance company is giving you to rebuild your home, you can go into a arbitration type mode that's in the policy that allows you to pick an expert that that represents you. The insurance company picks an expert that represents them, and the two experts pick on a neutral, which is called an umpire. And these days, I find myself doing more umpire work, so I'm like the neutral arbitrator, as well as, and from time to time, I do appraisals for the carrier or the insured. So it's a real challenging thing being like a judge, because what you say and what is done at the end of that process is set in stone. And so that's how some of these disputed claims get resolved. So I do a lot of that. Then writing, articles for you guys, and helping restorers, doing some mentoring, coaching, helping other estimators be better at their craft, as well as just simple things like how do you read a set of blueprints? How do you use Xactimate as far as the terms of what line items you can use to make an estimate more profitable? So I do a lot of that kind of stuff.
Very fascinating, meaningful stuff. So now I'm curious what it's like running running the businesses and work that you have today and focusing more on the estimating, the appraisal, the umpiring side of things versus a restoration business. What are the key differences or maybe similarities?
Well, there is similarities. There's a lot of restoration businesses that have consulting divisions within their company where they do what I do, like write an estimate for an insurance company, and get paid a fee per hour to do just that if they're not going to get the job of rebuilding. Me personally, I do a little bit of both. Once in a while, I find a good restoration job that I want, and so I'll do it. But most of my energy is being focused on what we're doing, sharing information, making our industry better, working with the IICRC to create standards that will, last for generations after I'm gone, to up and coming restorers in the future. Sharing all of these things because I just feel like it would be a crime for me not to be able to share lessons learned with all of our industry because there's no need for others to experience the hardships I did. Needlessly, I love to share and see I'm making a difference in helping people, not just the consumer, but restorers, be better at what they do. Because, I really find that really rewarding to give back.
Thank you. I know we have been benefits of that passion you have to give back and share your wisdom, experience, mistakes, lessons through R&R. We absolutely appreciate it and are excited to continue that partnership. I want to hear more about your restoration experience in terms of what would you say your areas of expertise and specialty and passion are within the restoration side of things?
I would say primarily fire and smoke damage, whether it's wildfire or structure fires, residential and commercial, but primarily residential. And I do quite a bit with older homes, like say homes that are built in the 1800s, which is what I think the term restoration seems to resonate, that you should be able to restore to a pre-loss condition an old home with all the craftsman type details and fancy woodworking. So I really enjoy being involved in fire restoration because it's far more complicated than water, mold, sewage, or flood damage. Although those can be complex, fire and smoke tend to be require a higher level of experience and knowledge to do the job right. So, yeah, I would say fire restoration is my specialty.
Okay, very cool. So then what would you say has been your most memorable fire restoration project?
Well, again, it would have to be working on a craftsman home that required a level of woodworking that doesn't exist. Things had to be carved, replicated, and that type of work goes well beyond our Xactimate line item pricing guides. It's all has to be done time and material. And the ultimate outcome, when you see a home that's literally half destroyed, restored to what it looked like, because in a historical home, you have to, by law, at least in California, when it's on the historical rolls, it must be restored exactly the way it was. You can't put in a nice new vinyl or aluminum window where there was a wood old window with wavy glass. It has to be replicated to be identical. And that's the, real rewarding part, is being able to bring something back to life that was ruined.
Very cool. That certainly resonates with me. Not that I have ever had the misfortune yet, fingers crossed, of going through a loss that you're talking about, but as an owner of a 19, 20, 100-year-old home and lover of historic buildings, I didn't realize that, Sean, that that was a niche that you have in a passion area. So very
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering, for restoration contractors who are considering adding fire damage restoration to their service offerings, what kind of advice would you share with them? What should they be thinking about considering? Yeah.
Well, so most restoration companies offer fire and smoke as part of their services. However, most restoration companies don't do much of it. When they do, I would say on an average, most restoration companies, smaller ones, will do maybe one or two a year, other than a kitchen fire where it's just smoke damage. So my advice is that, if you're a restorer and you're getting to your first or second, or you're not really comfortable with structure fire, get information, reach out to your colleagues in your area who are really well versed in it, partner with them, let them work with you and do hands-on, like the process of how to properly deodorize the house. Tap experts who can test for, every fire. I always say this, every fire has its own DNA. So a kitchen fire where, chicken on the stove burned is going to create byproducts far different than if a garage, fire, where a car burned in a garage. Those were plastics and appliances and, all sorts of other household items mix and burn. That smoke is next level. That's a whole different way that you're going to have to treat it. And so in some cases you can't. In some cases the house has to be torn down to the ground. It's just either too toxic, too much damage, and especially with clothing, textiles tends to be an area that some people think that they can restore and clean when in reality most likely they can't. And so my suggestion is just surround yourself, with people who are very well versed in fire, and get consultants. Pay a little bit of money to have someone come out who's an expert to guide you through some of the complexities of being able to guarantee when that house or that building's done that that smoke odor will never come back. So yeah,
Very helpful pointers there. I'm sure
yeah.
people listening will appreciate them if they're considering or adding or elevating their experience, their services when it comes to fire and smoke damage restoration. All right, so switching gears now, I'm curious about how exactly you layered becoming an author onto your experience as as a restoration professional and as an estimator and all of that. Where did this authoring thing come in and why?
Well, I never intended to write a book. I mean, I got kicked out of high school in the middle of 11th grade, so I was the last guy qualified to write a book about anything. But, it's interesting how life has its, twists and turns. I had a dear friend whose home was burned to the ground in a wildfire in San Diego, and he called and asked me to help him. And so I went out and we're sifting through the ash to find his wife's diamond, wedding ring. And the entire neighborhood was destroyed. This was a fire that happened in 2007. It was called the Witch Creek Fire. And a couple years prior to that, we had the Cedar Fire. These two fires combined, we lost about 5,000 homes, and tens of thousands were partially damaged from smoke or other occurrences. And so as a result of this, my friend's home, I helped him through the process of dealing with the adjuster, estimating the damage, getting demolition crews lined up. And at the end of the day, a year and a half later, he was able to rebuild a brand new home. So after 18 months, he selected a different contractor. to do the work. He asked me and my wife to come over for a housewarming party. So as we're driving through his neighborhood, a year and a half later, I noticed his is the only house that's been completely rebuilt. So I asked him, I said, what happened to your neighbors? And he said, well, the neighbor on my right or on my left got into a fight with his insurance company, lost their home and moved away. To this day, it's a vacant lot. And the neighbor on his right committed suicide. Then when I heard that story and I'm standing in this beautiful brand new home, I'm thinking to myself, boy, if those people had somebody like me in their life, or maybe a resource that kind of laid out a roadmap of what to do to recover from a fire, maybe their outcome would have been different. And that idea, that thought just stuck with me to where I just couldn't shake it because of that story of somebody taking their own life after losing everything. It compelled me to write a book, just like, okay, what do you need to do the second the fire truck leaves the curb of your house? I just started to write, and I started writing about, you know, 15 minutes after the fire truck leaves, what's the first thing you need to do? Then after that, watch out for scammers. How do you pick a contractor? Safety tips, scam prevention, public adjusters. Are they good? Are they bad? Do you need one? And went into what FEMA offers, the Small Business Administration, the Red Cross. So I really just immersed myself in everything recovery related. And so then I printed 12 copies of this book, gave it to our local fire chiefs. They saw it and they're like, we would give this out for free if you could find funding. And through a sequence of events, the Department of Homeland Security, the Red Cross, and our local utility provider funded it. And then it became available on every fire truck. To this day, it's on every fire truck in San Diego County. It's handed out immediately after a fire. So now I've thought to myself, oh, I left my mark on my community. I'm good. Then I got a call from the governor's office who wanted it in all 58 counties in the state. And then it went to Washington, D.C., Idaho, Colorado, and then it just went global. And I thought, wow, this is a global issue. People don't know what to do in the midst of once they've lost everything. And so it's been an ongoing thing where I help, people rebuild their lives after hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, fires, you name it. It applies to any kind. Even if it's just a pipe breaks underneath your sink, there's information in the book, which, all of this story I'm telling you led up to me writing The Red Guide to Recovery. So, yeah.
I think that is such a beautiful story. It's I love that this is truly a passion project and all that you poured into it ended up exponentially spreading, growing and people finding value in it. I'm not surprised. So again, that is what I mentioned earlier, what became the Red Guide to Recovery.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, as a restorer by trade, I thought to myself, wow, this is something that no other restorer has ever done. Why is it that we know this? We're like doctors that deal with cancer on a daily basis. Why aren't we doing more to put people on a level playing field? Help them through this process. I mean, it's going to generate sales if you're going to empower them with some knowledge, put their mind at ease, help them with their emotional trauma. It's what we do. So, yeah.
Very cool. So, just could you offer just a few examples of what kinds of information is enclosed there? What kinds of situations or advice or pointers are in the Red Guide to Recovery for property owners to help themselves be better prepared and suited for these unfortunate and unwanted situations they may find themselves in?
Well, I would say the biggest things is the very first chapter, the first page, is I tell people don't sign contracts prematurely. Because usually after the fire truck leaves the scene, there's all of these, we call them ambulance chasers, that show up on scene they want the board up and they want to take all the contents away. They want to do the cleaning, but these are complete strangers. This homeowner has no idea who these people are. And a lot of times after a fire, if you call 911, you've had a fire, there's people who listen to those radio calls and they hear what address that you're calling from. And they just run you through skip tracing software and they find out, oh, this is Valerie King. She lives at 123 Main Street. Oh, she works at R&R Magazine. Oh, let's just send our salesman to her. And they know everything about you to basically empower their salespeople to try to build a bridge, a relationship, somehow find common ground to get you to sign their work authorization to initiate initial services. Now, some of the guys are good guys that are doing this. I still to this day from time to time end up, helping people who chase fires. But there's a right and a wrong way. There's right and wrong motives. And so that's one of the first things as I tell the consumer, be careful who you sign with because you're married. Once you sign that piece of paper, it's over. They've got control of your insurance proceeds. They've got themselves entrenched in your job. And you may find out later on that they don't have licenses. They're convicted felons. There's all sorts of things that go along with that, making decisions on an emotional, uninformed basis. So the whole idea is to put people on a more level, educated playing field so they're making these decisions in an informed way instead of an emotional way. Then after that, there's safety tips. It talks a lot about public adjusters because they're out there in the insurance restoration world. Talks about a lot about scam prevention, different types of scams that are typically pervasive after disasters. There's pet scams, moving scams, contractor scam. There's endless amounts of scams. And then there's a chapter about trauma intervention and grief counseling. Some of these fires and disasters, someone's lost a child. What do you do? How do you, process a tremendous loss of a pet, a child, or just the enormity of everything you own is gone. Family photos, all your heirlooms. These are extremely traumatic situations. And so I try to cover all of that type of stuff in the book of what you would need from kind of beginning to end.
Very comprehensive, it sounds. And yeah,
Yeah.
definitely intriguing stuff that as a consumer, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, yes, yes, yes. As the new editor of R&R new to the industry, I'm like, wow, oh my goodness, time for me to pick mine up. Uh, so another resource that you authored, I mentioned earlier, Secrets of the Insurance Game.
Mhm.
What's that about? What is it? Who's it for?
So that book is kind of is for two audiences. One, it's for the consumer to be able to have somewhat of a idea of what the restoration insurance claim, property claim world looks like. Second, it's for restorers. It's something that will help restorers realize, things like, does 10 and 10 really work for overhead and profit? That's one of the chapters strictly dedicated to what does a restoration company need to survive and how do you get there and get the adjuster to approve it? Then there's again things that I talk about a lot of my personal experiences and along the lines of ethical estimating, as well as how to deal with adjusters and what they want to pay for and what they don't want to pay for. I talk a lot about managed repair programs and how there's pros and cons to being a part of those programs. So that book has got a lot of information for restoration professionals, whereas the Red Guide to Recovery is becoming a tool that restorers can use to build bridges with the fire service, other first responders, relief organizations. So a lot of restoration companies are now purchasing the book, putting their branding on it, and then the fire departments are now handing it out. And it's building a great bond between the fire departments and restorers, which is really a great marriage, a great partnership.
Wow, that is really interesting to hear about the bridge building being done among fellow restorers. I
Yeah,
didn't
because
realize that.
restorers would love just to be able to be called by the fire department, to a big flood. Every time there's a fire sprinkler goes off, the fire department responds. That may not be a fire, could be a big flood. And so to have this resource where you have a connection where you can actually get business from your local fire service and fire departments is a game changer. So now you don't have to sit by the phone waiting for that call. Your presence is already in that homeowner's hand. So it's a very unique tool that way.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that aspect of it. All right. Another of the many resources you've authored, the Personal Property Memory Jogger and Home Inventory Tool. What on earth is that one? Who does that serve? What are some of the takeaways within it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a resource I created. So after my friends lost their home, burned to the ground, one of the challenges that I saw, as well as other wildfire survivors or total losses, is that there's this problem. When everything is destroyed, like in a tornado, the adjuster is going to come to you as a homeowner and say, we need an inventory of everything that you had. Well, the restoration professionals are going to be like, well, we have no idea what you had. We didn't live here, so how are they going to know? The adjuster doesn't know because he or she had no idea. There's no photos, there's no video. So now you're just left blank, like, well, how do we even begin? So on one side, you have an insurance policy that's got, say, $100,000 worth of coverage for personal property. And most people, they will just write down big ticket items like the TV, the refrigerator, the stove, clothes, some clothes, but it's very, very minimal because they just are in this emotional state. They can't remember it all. And so this memory jogger I created is a pre-populated Excel spreadsheet that has over 6,000 of the most commonly found household items broken down into rooms. So now, if you have lost everything, you don't know what was in, you say, a bedroom, you can go to the memory jogger, go to bedroom, and it lists there, oh, bed, mattress, blanket, pillow, lamp, and it goes down to everything you can possibly think of that might be in a typical bedroom. And then it goes into, say, to the minutia of like a woman's vanity. It goes into what might be in the top drawer, cosmetics, so lip gloss, nail polish, eyeliner, shampoos, all these, cosmetics things. That's the level of it took about a year to compile all the different items in that list. And I went with friends to Walmart, Home Depot, trying to identify every little different thing I possibly could to populate this list. So now with people who've had total loss, they can say, oh yeah, I had, these types of Christmas ornaments. Oh, I had 50 DVDs. And it just it gives that homeowner the ability to maximize their insurance policy legitimately without having to create things that they may not have had, which it would be insurance fraud.
Very cool. So, and
Yeah.
again, I'm imagining this could also be another resource for the restoration industry to share in building bridges with the people they're serving. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, if a restoration company was able to, use this tool, basically, they can buy a copy of it and donate it to a family that lost everything. Not only will it be a welcome gift, but the homeowner can actually claim the cost of the memory jogger as part of their, insurance claim because it's a tool that was needed to compile this inventory. And it's not very expensive. It's like, I don't know, $50 or something, but the value it brings is it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars just in being able to memorize or remember stuff.
Good to know. Thanks for sharing that resource, Sean. There
Yeah,
are many more, but those were my top three that I figured we'd highlight.
sure.
Okay. Before we get into the exciting news I mentioned earlier, I would love to glean some insights from your more than 40 years in the industry. As you mentioned, you've made mistakes, you've learned lessons, you love to share that kind of stuff with your fellow restoration industry professionals. So let's start with lessons. What is the biggest lesson or lessons that you've learned over the course of your career in restoration?
I would say surrounding yourself with people who are veterans in whatever facet of your business that you need. You get the best lawyer, the best accountant, the best HR person, the best person who answers the phone with the nicest voice. And, I mean, just whether it's a carpenter, a plumber, electrician, find the best person for the job and keep, surround yourself with those people. They will help you avoid making costly mistakes because all of those people probably have been there. And it's just, it makes sense that you may spend a little bit more for quality, but at the end of the day, if you get yourself embroiled in some lawsuits for something, simple. I had a job as an example one time where I did an amazing job on a project. At the very end, I hired a very inexpensive house cleaner to do the final cleaning. Well, this house cleaner used Windex on some oak, or I'm sorry, some walnut paneling, and it left some white film over all this paneling. And it basically not only ruined the paneling, I had to strip and refinish it, but it also made a good reference into a non-reference, and so that was a really, you know, big lesson learned that even the smallest thing sometimes can lead into trouble. And so I guess that would be my biggest lesson learned is just knowledge is king. Oh, and never stop learning. Read books. Listen to these podcasts, read the articles in R&R magazine. You know, a lot of veterans spend a lot of time to post really valuable content, on the magazine, and take advantage of it. So
I can get behind that advice. No,
yeah.
but back to this whole idea of leveraging veteran perspective. So, what advice would you, a veteran in the industry, give to newcomers to the restoration industry?
Well, that's a question that we could go on for about 2 hours. But I would say again, talk to those who have gone before you. Get well informed. Do a SWOT analysis. If you're getting ready to come into this industry, a SWOT analysis is analysis where you do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So some communities are oversaturated with restoration companies. So you have to figure out what it will be your niche. What's your source of sales going to be? If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. So that's one thing to do is, do a real careful analysis of your marketplace before you jump in with both feet. And yeah, I mean, and knowledge is king. Get your certifications with ICRC. Follow, do ride-alongs. Get peer review. Oh my gosh, peer review. If you're in doing estimates on complicated or large losses over, $50,000, get somebody who really knows estimating to review your estimate. Use the Matterport camera. The Matterport camera is a great way to show guys like me, hey, I've got this job, Sean. Here's the Matterport link. I look at it. Here's my estimate. And there's people like me that will review the estimate and say, hey, you missed this and this and this. Add this before you submit it to the insurance adjuster. And that way you're not leaving money on the table. Because at the end of the day, if your job's not profitable, you're not going to last long.
Thank you. That
Yeah.
answer on advice to newcomers to the industry was jam-packed with nuggets of inspiration and in education. So I'm excited for listeners to hear it. I just learned a ton. Speaking of education, you talked about that being important, consistently investing in it. So I'm curious what sources of inspiration and education you refer to, turn to, favor. Books, podcasts, mentors, associations. What are your go-tos?
Well, believe it or not, I find a lot of good information on R&R Magazine. There's
Oh,
just a wealth of archived articles back, for the last 10 years that you can, put in the search bar, fire or smoke or mold, and chances are you're going to find something there that applies to what you're looking for. So as far as trade related details or information, R&R is probably the hub. There's other magazines out there, but then FEMA has a
mm,
lot of good information on it, as well as the EPA, OSHA. These are sources that apply to when we get involved in hazardous material situations like asbestos and lead. And so those are really good. And also, I read a lot of like Fire Rescue Magazine, which has a lot of
mm.
stuff from firefighter experience. And we all know that a lot of firefighters die every year of these weird cancers and other, heart problems and diseases that's a result of exposure to combustion byproducts. And so there's a lot to be learned from the guys who are going in fighting the fire versus restorers who are going in and cleaning up the same contaminants that those guys are exposed to. And then as far as books, I mean, I get a lot of inspiration from the Bible. I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a
Oh
great
gosh,
one for
yes.
marketing. And The Art of War by Sun Tzu is a really good book. So, yeah, I've got a sort of an arsenal of books that I read from to get wisdom that applies to business as well as ethics and how to treat people, and how to win over somebody who may be a very closed door, So learning how human nature works sometimes is a real powerful tool in when it comes to sales. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Thank you for that comprehensive list. I'm sure there's some stuff for us to all add to ours as we move forward and try to, including myself, as we learn more about this industry.
Hmm.
All right. Without further ado, I think it's time, and we've arrived at the end of the interview. I think it's time to share the news. That exciting news I mentioned earlier.
What news?
Sean will be joining our Who's Who lineup of regular contributors as an official columnist. He'll be sharing useful insights for the industry at least once a
Woo!
month, and those articles will be featured in the R&R weekly e-newsletter that deploys the fourth Friday of the month. As I mentioned earlier, Sean has been contributing insanely valuable content for years now, and it is only right, it's only appropriate that he is an official columnist. Okay, so Sean, do you want to do the honors of telling everybody what the name of this new column is?
Yes, sure. It'll be the Restoration Digest.
Love it. Yes, we're really excited to roll this one out. So, a late September, fourth Friday in September, it will be in your inbox if you're subscribed to our free e-newsletter. It'll be the top feature of the e-newsletter, his first column. All right. So, what sorts of topics can the R&R audience expect to see you cover here? My understanding is it's not just focused on one specific thing.
Well, being that I only have 12, articles to do for a year, it kind of limits me to a certain degree. But there will be stuff about fire, about smoke, which is kind of my passion, as well as different topics that cover the workings and operating a restoration business and how to make it successful. And things about, kind of topics that aren't typically covered in the magazine, like, what is a public adjuster? Should you work with one? Should you not? What do they do? So kind of just to give information that isn't sort of duplicating what others have already done, but to share information resources similar to what my articles in the past have shown, is to be unique content that I feel the industry needs to hear and read about to be better at what you do.
I'm all in. I think this will be a lot of fun. And yes, I've definitely seen that you have contributed content up until now that has run the gamut. It's been wide ranging. It's always very in depth, comprehensive, insightful, full of takeaways that are tangible and easy to put to work. And having done this interview with you and learned even more about your past, your story, your experience, I'm excited to see what else you pull from that to share with our audience.
Yeah. Can
So,
I add something to that?
oh,
So
please.
so I never really got thought about being a writer of articles until, it just one day it dawned on me, hey, maybe I should submit something. Now, most people, and I want to shout out to you restorers out there, if you have unique content that you want to share that you think would really benefit the restoration ecosystem, please share it with Valerie, and and step out of your comfort zone and just give it a try, because this is what I did. And so to be able to be published in a magazine, whether it's e-magazine or paper, it's kind of a big deal. It makes you a subject matter expert in your field or your area of expertise. So I really encourage you just to do it. So my the point being of all this is, when I first wrote an article about the what is it called, the Notre Dame Cathedral, and lessons learned from that fire. Not only did it make an article for the magazine, it made the feature cover article. Now that's big. I mean, that's like, hitting a home run. It's like, oh my gosh, I made the cover. And then I submitted a similar article on a different topic to Claims magazine, and lo and behold, that made the feature cover article. So, and I'm not really a writer, by trade. I just am telling my stories, as well as giving information about a topic that is very unique, that is compelling, and people, like Valerie, will see that, wow, this is something, or a subject or a topic that is going to resonate with everybody. So my challenge to you is, write something creative, unique, empowering, and you never know, you might make that feature cover article. So
Oh man, I could not have said that better myself. Thank you, Sean. Great perspective there because it's true. I mean, R&R, we truly believe that most of the best content comes from you, the people in the industry who, to Sean's point, you are the subject matter experts. So if if you've run into this challenge, or you've made this mistake and learned from it, or you name it, I mean, someone else has. There's bound to be a takeaway in there, whether it's a project you've worked on, or there's a list of do's and don'ts that you have in your head. I mean, there's a lot to be learned, and there are a lot of people who there's a lot of things that restoration covers, and everybody isn't an expert in every realm of it. So I couldn't agree more with you, Sean. Thanks for sharing that. It's so cool to hear. I didn't realize how your story in authoring for this sphere began, and see what a success it's become. You are totally a valued
Yeah.
contributor, and I would say at this point you are absolutely an author, a writer by trade.
Well, thanks.
So yeah, and see, now it's even more official. You are the Restorers Digest
Yeah.
columnist. You are the face of that. So
Yeah. And you know what? This column is not about me. I really want to underscore that I hope that I can encourage all of you guys out there who have been in the trades to step out of that comfort zone and do this, because we as an industry, we need to hear from you, because there's stuff that you guys are encountering every day that can be a lesson learned for somebody out there that'll really appreciate even the smallest tidbit, whether it's wearing a steel shank shoe versus just a steel toe shoe because of getting, stepping on a nail, and somebody losing a foot because they got infected. There's all sorts of safety things that you can talk about. You don't have to be a PhD or have a master's in anything. Your life experiences, the school of hard knocks, can tell a tremendous story for our audience. And so, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I really encourage all of you guys and gals out there to write about stuff that you've encountered that might be really interesting and helpful.
I love that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for your time and insight, Sean. This has been great. And it again, speaking of stories and sharing them, this marks our first real stories in restoration interview. So there will be an opportunity for people across the world in the restoration industry to not just put pen to paper, but to put voice to mic and share their
Yeah.
story this way if you're interested in participating. Here's another way to share with with fellow industry members what you've been through, what you're learning, what mistakes you've made, the whole gamut. So I'm excited to see you all what you have in store for all of us in your new column, Sean. And before we go, I want to make sure I ask where listeners can go to connect with you and learn more about what you're up to.
Well, the Red Guide to Recovery looks like this. It's a red book. Yeah. And they can get it at theredguidetorecovery.com or on Amazon. And we can talk about how it's customized for different, companies. And it has a whole spread that shows how it's customized for different agencies and companies and whatnot. And then the other book this is what it looks like: Secrets of the Insurance Game, with a house on fire on the cover. So,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So, yeah, they can reach me at my email is Sean, SEAN, at theredguidetorecovery.com. Or they can visit my other website, which is championconstructioninc.com.
That was perfect. All right, listeners and viewers, for more insights on restoration, remediation, and the people behind it all, visit our website, randrmagonline.com, Apple or Spotify. And if you haven't yet, please be sure to follow the podcast to keep up with our latest episodes. And also, if you could just give us a quick review and rating, we'd super appreciate it. We are also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, so we invite you to follow us there on social too. Now, if you, as I mentioned, are interested in sharing your real story in restoration, no matter where you sit in the industry or the world or your level, please reach out to me at kingv@bnpmedia.com. And don't forget to keep an eye out for Sean's new Restorers Digest columns the fourth week of each month at least. And if you aren't subscribed to our weekly e-newsletter, it is free. Just go to our website, click the subscribe button, and fill out the form. And I think that's that. This has been R&R's Real Stories in Restoration. Thank you for listening.